Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hey Woo Crew, before we jump into today's episode, I just really want to quickly touch on the Wise Wild Woman Mentorship program that is beginning this Friday with our Imbolc ceremony. I speak to it a little bit at the end of the episode as well, but I wanted to drop in here and just give the overview for anybody who's sitting on the fence, who's curious about this, or maybe who's hearing about it for the very first time. And my vision for this space, for this program, which is a seasonal program, is that it grows and shapes itself to meet the needs of all of those traveling within it. And so, should you choose to join us, now you can expect more magical surprises, delights, and supports added in as we journey through the seasons with intention and purpose in a great remembering together. This program is for you if you've felt that stirring in your soul and the little voice that whispers there's got to be a different way, a way outside of the hustle and grind, a way that honors your femininity, a way that is enmeshed in the great web of becoming that is all of life on this earth, a way that is drenched in purpose and joy and everyday magic. And while there is no one path that will give you all of this, I have found a path. And it is my honor to share it with you and invite you to join me today inside the Wise Wild Woman Mentorship Program. If you would like all of the details, please send me a note over on Instagram at I am Eileen March or an email to Eileen at My Luminous Life, and we can connect and see if it feels like a good fit for you. Okay, now on to our episode and the magic of Imbolc. Hello, and welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and today is our Imbolc episode. I love these seasonal episodes, and I know that you do too. And it's a really exciting moment as we shift seasons, as we shift to the next turn of the wheel of the year. And just as I drop in to record this, I was suddenly flooded with this memory of Imbolc last year. Last year in January, my partner and I headed down to Argentina to spend 3 months living and working from Buenos Aires. And while it was delightful to escape the last few months of cold and winteriness that it extends here in Calgary well into March and April often, it was the first time that I had traveled outside of the Northern Hemisphere since beginning to live by the wheel and move with the wheel of the year. And so I really was hyper aware of my body being thrown into a sense of dysregulation in a way that was nothing to do with the fact that I was away from home. I've traveled extensively, and I've always I enjoy the novelty and experience of being somewhere new. That didn't bother me so much, though of course it does have its effects. But it was really that as we left Canada in January, in the depths of winter, moving towards Imbolc, winter spring, or spring in the Celtic calendar, I was really craving that kind of slow coming out of hibernation, that slow build of energy that I could feel happening beneath the soil. I was really looking forward to all of the beautiful energies that this turn of the wheel would bring with it. And instead of getting to experience that feeling in place and embody those same energies, I suddenly thrust myself into Lunasa, into autumn. It was this really weird sensation. It was as though I had just skipped all of Imbolc and Bealchina and moved straight into Lunasa, or autumn. And it was so discombobulating. I really struggled to land. And I eventually realized that part of the struggle came from my resistance to it. I didn't want to do autumn and winter again. I just did those. And as soon as I was able to soften and say, okay, well, even though it's not my preference to be going straight back into autumn and winter, this is where I am. And at the same time, I was still holding space and cultivating ceremony around the seasons as they were occurring in North America, because that's where the people I work with at this stage of my career, that's where we are all located. And so I kind of had to sit in this space of I can be in both energies in a way. And even as I speak now, I wonder if part of my resistance was because autumn and winter are harder energies to embrace and embody in a culture that normalizes and prioritizes and holds as superior those spring, summer energies. So that's a whole tangent that I did not intend to go off on, and here we are. This is what happens because Eileen does not work with a script for these episodes. But this year, I am sitting here recording this episode to you from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I live, deep in the chilly throes of winter, looking forward to the promise of spring that Imbolc holds. So in the Celtic calendar, the seasons are Imbolc, Bealchina, which is Beltane, you may have heard it pronounced that way, Lunasa, and Samhain. And these are also the names of the cross-quarter fire festivals, the celebratory moments that mark that transition, sometimes called the earth festivals versus the solar festivals of the solstices and the equinoxes. And so you'll hear me use them interchangeably a little bit. I might be referring to the season of Imbolc, and I can also be referring to the festival or celebration of Imbolc. And they're energetically kind of the overarching 4 seasonal themes of the year are those 4 cross-quarter days. Now, in our modern calendar, of course, we do shift seasons at the solstices and the equinoxes, which in Calgary here at this latitude, this northern place that I live, and the weather patterns, it certainly does not feel anything like spring on February 1st or the eve of February 1st, which is traditionally when Imbolc falls and is celebrated. Even by Ostara, which is the spring equinox, it can still be very snowy and cold here. So the seasonal shifts do feel a little bit perhaps more embodied at those solstices and equinoxes, but as I've started to follow the wheel of the year and deepen into it and pay attention, I really have started to notice that those subtle shifts do occur earlier, especially in summer and autumn. That's when I really noticed it, is that like come Lunasa, come August 1st, I'm like, oh, there's that first leaf on the ground. Even though it feels like it's still the middle of summer, the shift begins. And so it's been really interesting to play with, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think it's important to recognize the energies of the season around you, and if you're listening to this from, I don't know, Florida, it's going to be different than it is further north where we have those more defined 4 seasons. It's going to maybe be quieter or more subtle. If you're even further south than that, you know, it's wet season and dry season, monsoon season and not monsoon season, and I'm totally unfamiliar with the seasonal shifts and changes in places that don't have those 4 seasons. So just recognizing that it isn't the same everywhere, and that what we speak about on this podcast, what I speak about on this podcast, is rooted in my history and tradition, which is I'm of European descent. My family's been in Canada for 4 generations, at least 3 or 4 generations. I'd have to look at my family tree, but most of my great grandparents were born here, and it's where I speak from, and it's what I'm called to do. And so I think it's really important that none of the things I share here are prescriptive. They're more descriptive, and they're my own descriptive explorations. And so, as I say always, if you've ever attended anything live with me, if you've worked with me, let yourself be right, for one. And I consider myself a guide of sorts, but I am certainly not a guru. And so anytime I'm sharing or speaking about anything, if it doesn't feel right in your body and your bones, then it's not right for you. And I want to give you that sovereignty, that full permission to disregard anything I ever say that doesn't land or resonate, and know that maybe it's for me, maybe it's for some of the people, the humans listening to this podcast, and maybe it's not for you, and that's okay, because not everything is for everyone. I'm reminded of when I was a midwife and helping women learn how to breastfeed. I would always say, there's a million different tricks and tips when it comes to getting a baby to latch successfully, when it comes to successful breastfeeding, and it's worth trying all of them, but the right way for you is going to be exactly that, your own right way, and not somebody else's. So try things on for size, see how they feel, keep the ones that feel good, leave the ones that don't. Okay, into Imbolc and this beautiful season. We will be gathering on Friday, January 31st in the evening in my home and online. It's hybrid, to celebrate this seasonal beginning together in circle in ceremony. You are, of course, as always, invited to join us. The link will be below in the show notes. You can sign up to come. If you can't attend live, you will receive the recording that you can sync into when you are able. And I'm really excited to be able to hold it. I always hold these ceremonies on Friday evenings because that is what works for my world, and it seems to be easier for folks who are attending as well. But it's fun when it lines up with the actual festival. So in the Celtic calendar, in the Celtic world, the day begins with dusk. And so all of these ancient festivals, whether they're these cross-quarter fire festivals or they're the solar celebrations that mark the midpoints of the seasons, all of them began at dusk, the night before what we would typically consider the day of. But that's because at dusk is when the new day begins, just like the new year begins in the dark with Samhain, with winter. And so it's fun this year to be able to sink in and really welcome Imbolc, welcome Brigid back to the land. It's awakening or a quickening of the land. So we are entering the season of spring. And Carmen Spaniola describes it as winter spring here in North America, in so-called Canada. She's on Vancouver Island, or she was on Vancouver Island. She's not anymore, actually. So it was definitely a little more springy there. I think that greening is starting to happen on Vancouver Island a little bit sooner. Well, I know it is a lot bit sooner than here in Calgary, but it's almost its current of energy. It's like the promise of spring, the hope of spring is arriving. The word Imbolc means in the belly, and it's really a reference to, again, this is an old agricultural calendar. And so at this time of year, the ewes, the livestock, would be pregnant. They'd be pregnant to bursting. They'd be getting ready to give birth. And so in the belly, or sometimes it has something to do with milk and milk flowing, that fullness, that ripeness. The goddess Brigid, who I'm going to get to here in a minute, is really associated with milk. And it's that fertility, right? That abundance that is coming, that promise again of spring and new birth and new life. It would have been a time of year where the livestock were brought out from their winter enclosures. Sometimes that meant, living in or under the home. They would have been cleansed. They would have been getting ready to take them back out to the pastures, to the grazing lands. The goddess Brigid, who then became Saint Brigid, is very closely associated with Imbolc. So depending on the stories, the myths, either she returns to the land at Imbolc or she becomes the maiden again at Imbolc. So some of the mythology around Brigid, or Brigid rather, I actually listened to a whole long thing about how to pronounce this deity / saint's name in Irish. And Bridget, that's how I should be saying it. There is a pronunciation. So generally you're going to see her name spelled Brigid, and that current pronunciation would be Bridget. That's going to be the most common way to spell it. Sometimes you'll see it with an H in there, so Brighid, and most folks will currently pronounce that still Bridget. However, you wouldn't be incorrect to pronounce it Brigid. And that's that, getting rid of a bunch of the letters in the middle of these Irish words, these Celtic words. But that's a tangent. Brigid is, in mythology, a maiden. She's a triple goddess. She is one of the oldest goddesses of the Tuatha De Danann, which are the original supernatural race of beings who inhabited Ireland prior to the arrival of humans. Her name means exalted one. She is a triple goddess of smithing and poetry and medicine and midwifing and all sorts of things she represents. And then the Christianized version of her became Saint Brigid, and she's said to be born in Ireland around 453 AD, so Common Era, CE, let's call it CE, let's do it right. And this is one more example of, and perhaps she did, likely this is a historical figure that was then sanctified, as it were, and her celebrations began to be held at the same time as Imbolc. And again, we see the way that Christianity folded in the pagan traditions, because Imbolc is actually, of all of our Wheel of the Year celebrations, we have records of celebrations of the historicity of this moment in the wheel. They go all the way back to the Neolithic period. So it's really, really ancient, far beyond Christianity. However, the Christians, as so frequently they do, integrated this celebration, sainted a woman named Brigid, and therefore were able to weave in the existing traditions, the existing belief system into their own traditions, which allowed for more people to participate. Sometimes you'll hear her called Saint Bride as well. And bridey dolls are something that are still made as part of Imbolc traditions to honor her. I have gone off on several tangents now. However, trying to discuss the mythology of Brigid, she is a maiden at Imbolc. And in some of her mythology, she progresses through the year from maiden to mother to crone. And so in that particular line of mythology, she becomes the Cailleach, who we've been wintering with, that old woman, the hag, the witch, the creatrix of the land of Ireland. And so the mythology either shows or tells us of how Brigid becomes mother and then crone, and then at Imbolc becomes maiden once again, or it is a story of the Cailleach giving up her hold, going dormant perhaps, and Brigid returning. Brigid is very associated with fire and water. And Saint Brigid of Kildare, she has a church there, and there is a fire that was tended for centuries and never went out. There was a brief period of time where it stopped being tended to. The nuns no longer kept it lit. It has returned, but there's some beautiful mythology around that too. And this tending of the flame, it is said that there are 20 days of tending. It's 20-day cycles of tending the flame, where each day, one nun, the Brigid nuns, was assigned to tend the eternal flame of Brigid, Saint Brigid. And on the 20th day and night, the fire was left. No nun was inside that inner chamber, and Brigid herself came to tend it. There's some really, really lovely different mythologies. We see fire, we see this really powerful feminine wisdom. And in more ancient myths, or today as well, Brigid, the goddess, and Saint Brigid are really associated with wells. And there's lots and lots of wells in Ireland. If you've ever been, it's a very green land, and there are lots of natural springs welling up from the ground. They call them wells, these sacred spaces. So it would be one of the things to do if you are celebrating Imbolc in Ireland. You might go to a well and celebrate there. If you are celebrating anywhere, really, you could choose to make bridey dolls, which are just little, like, very simple dolls made out of wheat or some other kind of, like, long stemmed grass. Brigid's cross or Brigid's crosses, you'd recognize this image. That you could weave crosses, you could visit a sacred well, or even just some water, a spring, a river, a creek, a lake, whatever, for blessings, for inspiration, lighting candles, having a fire. All of the Wheel of the Year celebrations, candles and or fire are part of the celebration, right? Welcoming back the return of the sun as well. Ritual cleansing, we think of spring cleaning, that kind of activity would be common around now. Getting outside, connecting with nature, doing some divination work, cleansing, and then thinking about, those themes of the spring. So we're moving into the season of new beginnings, of burgeoning energy, of air, so the home of the mental self, of communication. This is the time to nourish those seeds of intention that you planted in the fall and winter that have lain dormant, and they're now ready to be birthed into the light. There's the themes of fertility and rebirth and healing and celebrating and clearing out those stagnant energies or weeds or extra leaves that haven't decomposed that you need to clear away to make room for that new life to spring forth. So all sorts of beautiful ways to honor and celebrate this springing, this greening, this viriditas energy of Imbolc. The ceremony that I am holding on Friday also marks the beginning of the Wise Wild Woman Mentorship program. So the ceremony itself is open to anyone who wishes to sign up and join, but all of the women who are stepping into this mentorship space with me will be automatically invited to join. That's part of this program, this space that I'm creating. And I'm so excited to finally have brought this into the world. And it's interesting, last night I was reading Sharon Blackie's newest book, which is Wise Women and Myths and Stories for Midlife and Beyond. And it struck me because I was sitting with the name of this mentorship space and this reclamation of the wild woman. I'm also reading Women Who Run with the Wolves right now, and thinking about the idea of claiming the title of wise woman. And I wrote last night that I do not claim to be wise, and I am only just reclaiming my wildish self. But I do passionately believe in becoming a good elder. I wish to grow into an older woman who stands fiercely in her wildness and confidently in her embodied wisdom. And as I stand at this threshold to midlife, turning 40 last week, I feel as though I'm entering that time when I can start to claim a little bit of the wisdom of older years. I'm not there yet. I don't know if we ever feel like we fully arrive, but I really think that it's so important as women to remember the wise, wild women among us, to honor them and to cherish and cultivate our own becoming into them. And so part of why I created this space was to help all of us reconnect with that wild woman inside, and to connect perhaps for the first time with the wise elder that we wish to become, and to remember our intimate natural selves. I almost said tie with nature, but it's not even a tie. We are of nature. And so it's a space to come home to our bodies, to the nature of our bodies and her cycles. It's so powerful and important to remember all that we have lost under this patriarchal system, this exploitative, extractive, capitalistic, hustle culture, white supremacist, patriarchy. How many words can I throw at it? And while I do not purport to have all the answers, and certainly don't expect to change the whole world, I do feel a strong draw and like a need almost to do what I can and to help my own self decouple from all these toxic spaces and remember my body, myself, my wisdom, my femininity, and reconnect with the land and hold space and empower others to do that. And the best way I know how to do that is in community. So if you are listening to this and it's not yet Friday the 31st and you are feeling the call to join us inside of this beautiful space, the doors are still open at a founder's rate. And payment plans are available and bonuses are there because who doesn't love a good bonus? And I would so cherish having you inside with us. I'm going to leave a link under this episode as well for you to hop into a quick clarity call with me if that feels good. And quite honestly, if you're listening to this next week and you're like, I want it in, reach out to me. The cart will be closed and, that invitation, it will open again. It will open again seasonally. And so I want to hold the space for this to become such a juicy, beautiful community, network, support, foundation for rested, wise, wild women to change the world, because I know that it is possible. I know that we can together. Okay, please join me for Imbolc. Sign up live, enjoy afterwards if that's easier. Please let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, if you want to share a little bit, if you don't join me for our Imbolc ceremony, let me know if you celebrate. Let me know how you mark this shift. Let me know if it feels like a shift for you where you're at, or maybe it doesn't. I'm always keen to hear from you. Either you can leave comments if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave comments in Spotify. You can leave a rating, a review. That always helps ever so much on YouTube. Like, subscribe, those things. And then come find me over on Instagram at I am Eileen March. I would love to connect with you over there. I am an open book. I am the one in my DMs there. So send me a note. Let me know what resonated, what landed, and how you are welcoming Imbolc this year. Okay. Much love to you all. Many blessings. Thank you for being here with me. And I'll talk to you next week.